I'm generally a pretty brethren kind of guy, although now and then I find myself hanging out with some Catholics. More specifically, one of my regular places for times of spiritual retreat is a Catholic retreat center on the northeast side of Wichita called the Spiritual Life Center. It's a place that is deeply meaningful to me for a lot of reasons. One small reason is that they have a number of pieces of artwork that I find particularly moving. Specifically, they have a number of interesting images of Jesus that I find captivating. For starters, they have an outdoor Stations of the Cross. The Stations of the Cross is a series of 14 different points in the story of Jesus' journey to the cross. This particular one is a circular path with bronze reliefs in the different scenes in the story. The path ends in the middle, not simply with Jesus being buried, but rather there is a large black stone slab with a crack in the middle and a white carved marble burial shroud, all of which symbolizes the resurrection. This, however, is only one of the images of Jesus that they have. As you walk into the main entrance, you walk through a set of life-size bronze statues of the story of the wedding at Cana, which is where Jesus performed his first miracle of turning water into wine. There are guests at the wedding talking to the wine steward, Jesus and his mother arguing about whether he should perform the miracle, and even a servant offering each guest a cup of wine as you walk through the doors. It's quite the image of Jesus. But there are other images around the building as well. Some of the images are from classical European artists such as Rembrandt. Others are in more of a modern avant-garde style. Some show Jesus as what might be the more familiar white-looking Jesus, and others depict him from different ethnicities from around the world. Some are pictures of him as an adult in familiar biblical scenes. Others show him as a child, with artistic license being taken in the image. Over the years, I've spent quite a bit of time gazing at these images of Jesus. Some of them slip in and out of my awareness with ease, while others have managed to hook themselves into my being and have stayed with me for years. Whether we realize it or not, these kinds of images of Jesus can actually be very important for the way that we understand the nature of God, as well as what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Sometimes the images have a direct and conscious impact on us. Like I said, there are images of Jesus that have stuck in my memory so strongly that there are times that I have found myself remembering and thinking about some of these images for hours on end. Sometimes we choose to hold a particular image of Jesus in our minds. Other times, however, particular images of Jesus shape our lives in ways that we may not even really notice or understand, but still have a profound impact on how we think about who God is and who Jesus is. One of the easy ways to see this at work is when we talk about the image of Jesus that we have in our minds and connect that to the history of race and even racism. In 2001, an anthropologist made a reconstructive image based on a real Jewish skull from first century Palestine. Not that this is exactly what Jesus looked like, but if Jesus were a man of his time, and he was, we could surmise that he may have looked something like this. Which means that we can be pretty safe in saying that Jesus did not look like this. And yet, when we do a Google image search for Jesus, most of the results show us a very European-looking Jesus. You have to search specifically for a black Jesus, or Latino Jesus, or Asian Jesus, or something else if you want to get a different-looking Jesus. The default image of Jesus in our culture is that Jesus is white, even though he clearly wasn't. Now, there's a long history as to why exactly this has become the default image of Jesus, but its implications are significant. We've talked about this in other conversations in church, but the basic idea of white supremacy is that being white or whiteness and white culture are seen as the best or even simply the default for all areas of life and culture. Having the default image of Jesus be a white Jesus not only reinforces whiteness as the norm, but when the almighty creator of the universe is also understood to be white, well, then it's not actually that hard to make the jump to worshiping whiteness itself. And no, I'm not actually just speculating on this. I've seen it happen in real time. A few years back, a news anchor quite vehemently insisted that both Jesus and Santa Claus were white. For the record, the original St. Nicholas was from Turkey, which means he wasn't white either. But even more recently, at the beginning of August of this year, a fairly significant political strategist again insisted that Jesus was white, which incited a whole storm of responses on social media. To be clear here, my point is not really just about Jesus and race. This is only one of the ways that we can view Jesus that can have a very deep impact on who we think Jesus really is and what it means to follow him. Another example. Many of us in the Peace Church tradition understand Jesus to be someone who rejected the use of violence, who brings reconciliation with the world not by dominating others by force, but by giving up his life for others. But listen to this quote from a pastor in 2007. In Revelation, Jesus is a prize fighter with a tattoo down his leg, a sword in his hand, and the commitment to make someone bleed. That is a guy I can worship. I cannot worship the hippie, diaper, halo Christ because I cannot worship a guy I can beat up. Those are two very, very different images of who Jesus is. And again, these are only two of the images of Jesus that we might find ourselves holding on to in our mind. There are many others. Do we think of Jesus as the conqueror or the slain lamb? Is Jesus always in a state of dying, or is he resurrected from the grave? Is he the Jesus who laughs and plays with children, or the one who argues with scholars? Is Jesus a great wisdom teacher, simply a nice guy, a Messiah? And if he's a Messiah, what kind of Messiah is he? And the images of Jesus that we could hold in our minds go on and on and on. Now, the reason that all of this matters is because the image of Jesus that we all have in our heads has a massive impact on what it means for us to follow him. The word Christian simply means a little or a smaller version of Christ. We Christians are a small version of Christ, which means that who we think Christ is directly shapes what we're trying to be and do in the first place. And we're certainly not alone in this. This has been true all the way back to the beginning, including Peter and the other disciples. Who do you say that I am? This is a really fascinating question for Jesus to ask his followers. Actually, Jesus first asks who others say that he is, to which they respond that some people think he's John the Baptist, or Elijah, or Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets come back to life. All of which, by the way, had different implications for who people thought this Jesus guy was and what he was doing. But then Jesus asks his own disciples, who do they say that he is? That's when Simon Peter pipes up and says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And for once, Peter got the answer right. Jesus gives him a tremendous affirmation for this answer and even says that the church will be built upon him. It's an amazing scene. But then something really strange happens. After Peter gives arguably one of the best answers to any question he has ever been asked, literally 4 or 5 sentences later, Peter gets it so wrong that Jesus calls him Satan. Why is this? Well, I think it's because even though Peter said the right words, he still had the wrong image of Jesus in his mind. Or at the very least, he had the wrong image of a Messiah in his mind. See, in that day and age, when you asked what a Messiah was, there was a fairly standard kind of image that came to mind. A Messiah was someone who was sent from God to free people from a situation of oppression. A Messiah would defeat the enemy that was holding them in captivity. And most importantly, a Messiah would reestablish Israel as a self-governing nation-state free of any outside control. All of which, by the way, would be done by leading an army into battle, after which the Messiah would take the throne as king. In short, Messiahs don't lose. They win the war. But here, just after Peter has named Jesus as the Messiah, Jesus begins to tell them how he is going to suffer at the hands of the powerful, and how he will even be killed, and how he will come back to life on the third day. And Peter freaks out, because that's not the image of a Messiah he has in his head. Dying means you lost, and Messiahs don't lose. So Peter naturally objects. And Jesus calls Peter Satan and tells him to get out of his way, because this is how it's going to happen. Peter objected because his image of who Jesus was did not match who Jesus really was. And because Peter had a different kind of image of who Jesus was, he also had a whole different understanding of what it meant to be his follower and what the future was going to hold for them. Jesus is headed to the cross. And Peter wants to start chopping people's ears off. Different images of Jesus can lead us down very different paths. The way we imagine Jesus, the kind of image of Jesus that we have in our heads, shapes who we think Jesus is and what it means for us to follow him. In fact, there are times where we might be like Peter, where we might be able to say the right words, but even still get it wrong, because we have a different image of what those words mean than what Jesus is really talking about. We might rightly say that Jesus is Lord or Savior or Messiah, but at the same time, we have a different images of what a Lord or Messiah or Savior even is. The images that we've been seeing today are images that people have in their homes or in their communities that they see on a regular basis. The reason that I asked for people to send these images in is because these are the kinds of images that shape how we think about Jesus. The art we see, the stories we tell, the way we describe Jesus, the particular scriptures that we regularly read, they all shape the image of Jesus that we have in our head, which in turn shapes how we go about the task of following Jesus. Today, I'm not going to say that this image is wrong or this one is right. What I want us to do is to ask more questions. Pay attention to the images of Jesus that are and that are not a part of our lives. Ask what those images teach us about who Jesus is. Ask how they are shaping us in small ways on a daily basis. Ask yourself what kind of image of Jesus you have in your mind, what has shaped that image for you in the past, and ask how that image of Jesus needs to grow and change in the future. I want us to leave here today wrestling with the same question that Jesus posed to Peter. Who do you say that Jesus is?